Imagine the coldest night you have ever experienced. Now make it last 20,000 years. That is not an exaggeration. The last glacial maximum, the peak of the most recent ice age, gripped the Earth for roughly 20,000 years, reaching its coldest point around 20,000 years ago. Average global temperatures were 6 to 8 degrees Celsius colder than today. That doesn't sound like much until you realize that a difference of 5 degrees is the gap between the world we live in now and a planet where ice sheets 2 miles thick covered most of North America and Northern Europe. Your ancestors survived all of it, without heated homes, without insulated clothing from a factory, without GPS, without preserved food in sealed containers, without a single piece of technology that didn't fit in one hand. And not just barely survived. They made art. They built complex social networks. They developed sophisticated tools. They migrated across continents. How? The answer involves a combination of biology, ingenuity, and social organization so effective that it kept our species alive through conditions that would kill most modern humans within days. Let's start with the body. Your body is not as helpless in the cold as you might think. Research by anthropologist Lynne Aiello and others studying the evolution of human thermal regulation shows that Homo sapiens had already been adapting to cold stress for hundreds of thousands of years before the Ice Age even reached its peak. Our ancestors evolved larger bodies in colder climates, following a pattern biologists call Bergmann's rule, where animals in colder regions tend toward larger body mass to retain heat more efficiently. They also developed a higher resting metabolic rate in cold-adapted populations, burning calories faster to generate internal warmth. But biology alone wasn't enough. The real survival engine was technology. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe and Asia tells a remarkable story of material innovation. By 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens were producing tailored clothing. Not animal hides draped over the shoulders. Actual tailored garments sewn together using bone needles, some of which are so fine they could pass for modern sewing needles. Researchers excavating sites in Siberia, including the remarkable Sunghir burial site in Russia, dated to around 34,000 years ago, found evidence of clothing decorated with thousands of tiny ivory beads, suggesting layered fitted garments that covered the entire body, including the head, hands, and feet. This matters more than it might seem. A human being without adequate clothing loses heat so rapidly in sub-zero temperatures that death can follow within hours. The invention of tailored, layered clothing was not a luxury. It was the difference between survival and extinction. Fire came next. Or rather, fire came before, and became more sophisticated. Homo sapiens had been using fire for hundreds of thousands of years, but during the Ice Age, the management of fire became a high-stakes survival skill. Archaeologist Wil Roebroeks and his team studying sites in Northern Europe found evidence that fire use in cold climates was continuous and deliberate, maintained not just for warmth, but for cooking, which increased the caloric efficiency of food in an environment where calories were dangerously scarce. Here's something most people don't realize about caloric scarcity in the Ice Age. The megafauna, the giant animals that roamed Ice Age landscapes, were not merely impressive. They were a survival resource of almost unimaginable value. A single woolly mammoth could provide thousands of kilograms of meat, fat, and bone. Fat in particular was critical. In extreme cold, your body burns fat for heat with extraordinary efficiency, and Ice Age hunters understood this instinctively. Archaeological evidence from numerous mammoth kill sites shows that ancient hunters selectively extracted the fat-rich marrow from large bones, sometimes carrying those bones enormous distances from the kill site back to camp. But hunting megafauna was extraordinarily dangerous. A woolly mammoth stood 3 to 4 meters tall and weighed up to 8 tons. A woolly rhinoceros, a cave bear, an aurochs. These were not prey that one person could bring down alone, or even a small group without coordination. What made Ice Age hunting possible was not strength or individual skill. It was collective intelligence. Researchers studying Ice Age social organization, including work by archaeologist Clive Gamble, who spent decades analyzing the networks of Upper Paleolithic people, found evidence of long-distance exchange networks stretching hundreds of kilometers. Amber, shell, and flint were traded or shared across vast distances, suggesting that Ice Age humans maintained social relationships far beyond their immediate group. These extended networks were not social niceties. They were survival infrastructure. A group facing a local famine could call on distant allies. A group whose key hunter was injured could draw on the knowledge of specialists from neighboring bands. Shelter was the third pillar of Ice Age survival, and here too your ancestors showed extraordinary ingenuity. In regions where timber was available, early humans built simple wood-framed shelters. But on the open mammoth steppe of Eastern Europe and Siberia, where trees were scarce, they built something that staggers the imagination. Archaeologists excavating sites in Ukraine, including the famous Mezhyrich site dated to 15,000 years ago, found the remains of huts constructed entirely from mammoth bones. Dozens of mammoth skulls, jawbones, shoulder blades, and leg bones were interlocked in structural arches, creating dome shelters that could house multiple people and withstand the brutal winds of an Ice Age plain. These were not crude shelters. They were engineered structures. Inside these shelters, fire was maintained continuously. Researchers analyzing charcoal and ash deposits from Ice Age dwelling sites found evidence of fires kept burning for extended periods, sometimes fueled by animal fat when wood was unavailable. The inside of a well-maintained Ice Age shelter, even in conditions of extreme external cold, could be kept warm enough to sustain life and allow the detailed handwork, tool-making, and sewing that survival required. And then there is the question that every archaeologist eventually confronts. Why did our ancestors also make art? The famous cave paintings of Chauvet Cave in France, dated to 36,000 years ago, were not made by people who had solved all their survival problems and had nothing else to do. They were made by people under intense survival pressure in the depths of one of the coldest periods in human prehistory. The animals depicted, woolly rhinos, lions, bears, and horses, were the animals these people depended on or feared. The act of painting them was almost certainly not decoration. Researchers, including archaeologist Jean Clottes, who spent years studying the cave, argued that these images served ritual and social functions, reinforcing shared knowledge about prey behavior, encoding information across generations in a world without writing, and binding the group together through shared symbolic experience. The Ice Age did not just test human survival, it built human culture. The pressure of extreme cold, scarcity, and danger forced the kind of cooperation, long-term planning, and collective knowledge sharing that defines us as a species. Every layered piece of clothing, every bone-framed shelter, every painted animal on a cave wall was a solution to the same problem. How do you keep a small group of large-brained, physically vulnerable mammals alive in a world actively trying to kill them? They solved it with each other. The coldest night you have ever experienced. The one that made you reach for another blanket, turn up the heat, or pull someone closer in the dark. Your ancestors felt something like that every single night for 20,000 years, and they woke up anyway.